Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of our DebConf 19. Please receive and give a big applause to Sam to present bits from the Debian project leader.
Hi there, everyone. So, I guess it's really an honor, or no, it certainly is really an honor to be standing here before everyone. Debian is a really wonderful community, and to have the privilege to work with you all to facilitate moving this community forward and helping other people around the world understand how awesome we are is something that I'm deeply moved to be able to do. And I'm really enjoying it for the most part. So I'd like to start out by thanking a number of people who I think have made this event and Debian possible. I'd like to first of all thank the local team here and the entire DebConf team all around the world, the people who've actually put on this conference. Also, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Infomaniac, Google, and Lenovo, and all the rest. And I would like to, what is this doing? Okay, and I would also like to thank all the contributors around the world who've made Debian possible. We wouldn't have an operating system or a community without you. So, this is a point where we normally look at what's happened in our community since the last year. And what? Okay, right. Of course, I wasn't here last year. I was actually off busy doing something else that kind of got in the way of me being able to afford the time and money to make it to DebConf. But I did manage to bring Debian to my wedding, both in terms of the kilt and also, of course, if you're going to run sound for a wedding, you need hardware to do it on. And of course, if you're going to have an operating system for that, there's really only one choice. So, but moving on. Okay. Is this a Buster slide? Okay, great. Sorry. So there has been a lot that's happened in the last year. We released Buster, and I'll admit thank you to the release team and everyone for making that happen when I submitted the talk proposal for this. I assume we probably would have, but it would be kind of a little awkward to be up here with a session talking about how great Buster was when we were sitting there in the last weeks of the freeze. But Buster is a truly amazing release. It's bigger and better than ever, more source packages. We've done some really amazing things on the security front. Secure boot we finally got working, which is something that we've needed for a while and that is an essential part of being able to meet users' needs in the current world. But we've also started making some really important strides towards actually securing the applications on the system at the system level with AppArmor. And of course, Buster does contain things like Flatpak and Snap that attempt to provide that sort of isolation for user containers as well. And I think we've really managed to hit a good balance in our release schedules between, we took 25 months from Stretch to Buster. That's long enough that if you're really interested in the latest software towards the end of that, you're sitting there going, Stretch is really kind of long in the tooth. And yet it's short enough that if you're really interested in a stable long-term system, you're very glad we offer LTS. And that Stretch is supported for a while after Buster is released. And so I think we've hit a stride. So in the past, another thing. Sorry. Sorry about that. So in the past, we've had the donations of HPE that have helped us out in meeting our equipment needs and moving forward with getting us the infrastructure we need to host Debian. And we were a little bit worried coming into the last year or so because that was unlikely to happen in the future. But through the generous donations of Handshake and another sponsor and everyone who's continuing to support, we found that we're actually in a very good financial situation. For me, the moral is that we have a great community of people who care about Debian. And if we come to them with a real need, they will come and meet our needs. And so we move forward. So I've already actually managed to do something as DPL, which is kind of cool. During the campaign, I said I would go work on 3 discussions and try and drive them forward. And we managed to have a discussion where we all got together and talked about what our needs were in terms of recommending DH to get a bit more uniformity across the archive in terms of packaging. And we succeeded in doing that. And I'm really amazed to say that not only we succeeded in doing that, we even succeeded in getting it into policy. And I'd really like to thank the policy editors for that. We will probably be getting it into Lynchon pretty soon. That's blocked on me writing up some information that the Lynchon maintainers have requested. So that's really exciting. So one of the things that sort of came out of the DH discussion and a couple of other things is that the maintainers, we've been evaluating the balance between our maintainers. Maintainers are our strength. There's no way we could accomplish Debian without giving people individual power. I mean, can you imagine if we all tried to argue about each of the 30,000 source packages? It would be insane. We would get nothing done. And so the maintainers really are, the fact that we delegate responsibility in so many different ways is one of the huge strengths of the project. Unfortunately, it's something that we are struggling with a bit because there are some weaknesses. And we're finding that making changes across the project or dealing with cross-coordination issues have always been a touchy point, have always been something that's hard to get right. And I think we're suffering from that a fair bit, both emotionally and technically. And this DH decision is one of the first times we've really revisited that and looked at basically saying, hey, we as a project are going to go evaluate something, and we're going to make a decision that not all the maintainers agree with, and that's going to affect some of the maintainers. And I think as we go forward, we're going to have to reevaluate that balance and continue to figure out. We clearly need a strong maintainer model, but perhaps not entirely as strong as we've had in the past. And I think one of the things going forward is to figure out how exactly that works. So another thing I've been working on is the anti-harassment team and our process around conduct in the project. Earlier in the year, we had some discussions that we deferred because we were busy talking about a specific issue, and a lot of people brought up the point that we really didn't want to be having a discussion of how to handle the general case when we were in the middle of discussing a very specific case. And there was sort of a proposal to defer that until February or so. We actually deferred it a lot longer than that, and I think that was pretty good. But I think it is really important that we have decided to come back to that, because I think that there's people who had some real issues that they wanted us to consider. And in order to create a community of respect, we actually have to listen to the people when they do have concerns and think about them and look to address them. So I spent basically the month of June working on this problem, collecting a lot of feedback, listening to people, and a whole bunch of talking and reading years worth of DPL archives about many of the conflicts we've had. And right now we're in the middle of a discussion where the project is talking about what it wants from this process. I think very soon, quite possibly this afternoon, we're going to hear from the team about what they propose to deliver. And then we can reconcile that and see where we are. So one of the things that has really come to me, become incredibly obvious to me, is that this is an amazing community, amazing product, and we have a lot going for us. And the DPL position gives you visibility into that. It's been a real pleasure, and I want to share some of that with you. One of the things that I've that has helped me in approaching Debian and actually really all of life is that to pay attention to the things that are great about a situation, to pay attention to things that make you happy, and things that your gratitude, giving it and receiving it. And then to process the things that aren't as happy, the problems, the areas where we have to improve. That's an important part of growing as well. But don't let it get you down. So another thing that I'd like us to look at is everyone here has probably had an experience of someone in this community who's helped you out and who's basically reminded you how we are a strong community and how we can depend on each other. I'd like to call these Debian Heroes, and I think we all have some, and we all run across them in our work. I like us to get in the habit of telling people that they are our heroes when that's true, so that we can all remember that we do make this better. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about a couple of my heroes. The first one is someone who I was sitting there and I was working on some software and it didn't work for some songs that I put into it. It seemed to be dependent on the file name. And it was a regression from stretch to buster. And it was buried deep in a bunch of code. And if I encoded the file name directly, it was fine. But if I used it as a variable reference, it wasn't. And now I filed the bug with a test case. And I'm like, I bet I'm never going to see this bug fixed. It was just one of those really obscure, hard upstream things that you sit there, is anyone ever going to get to this? And the maintainer filed it upstream, passed along my test case. And within a week, he cherry-picked a patch to fix it. And I'm like, wait, you mean when I file a bug as a user, I can actually get my problem fixed, even if I don't understand how to do it myself? I mean, yeah, that's what we say on paper, but it's really wonderful to see times when that happens. So my first hero is Felipe Saitler, and I apologize for butchering people's names, who reminded me that, yes, our users, and so we're all users, matter. The second hero is, well, someone who's tirelessly made Debian work for me, and part of a team, the accessibility team in particular. And one person, but this has been someone who's really been there for me when I've run into trouble. And I don't work on accessibility stuff in Debian. It's just I'm more interested in security and stuff like that. And I'd do it if I had to. But it's really cool that I can go upgrade from stretch to buster. And the only thing that really got in my way was timidity ate my sound. But once that was fixed, basically, it just worked and it kept on talking. And that's a lot of people who are responsible, but one of the ones who really matters to me is Samuel Tybalt, and for his wonderful work on Debian accessibility. So during my campaign, I talked about how I wanted to approach kind of working on healing and growing and making decisions. And my goal in Debian is to empower us and work through using techniques that I can try out, and if they work, we can all learn and we can all practice. That, no, this is something that maybe I have some good skill at, but it's something where we can all practice and learn new things and get better at making decisions, at treating each other with respect and compassion, and at solving even the difficult problems where we grow rather than hurt from the experience. So I wanted to go over a couple of the things that I've been working on to accomplish that. The first, and I think people have kind of picked up on this, is how I've been trying to approach technical discussions. And basically what I try and do there is find a facilitator, in ones where I'm leading it, it'll be me, who's going to sort of drive the discussion, try and be fairly neutral, but ask some questions and look at where the consensus is emerging and then follow up on that and see what happens. And then But what's really important to make this happen is to, towards the end, issue a consensus call. This is what I think we said. This is where I think we got. This is where we have disagreement. This is where we have agreement. And this is where we weren't able to decide. And then see if that sticks. Because if you publish a consensus call saying, hey, I'm pretty sure that we agree that we're going to switch to RPM by bullseye, that you'd get pretty quick feedback that perhaps you'd gotten something a little bit wrong. And it would be very clear that where you perhaps didn't quite understand the community. So on the emotional side, again and again, what I'm really seeing is that we can make better progress if people feel heard, if people feel like the points that matter to them were considered by the project. And so I think one of the most important things in approaching emotional discussions is to try and take the time to interact with people who disagree with you pretty strongly, whose positions you wouldn't normally spend as much time on. And make sure that you understand those positions well enough that you can explain them back to the person who holds them and have them say, yeah, you got it. That doesn't mean you're agreeing. It doesn't mean that you're going to decide that just because you understand something, we're going to do it. But it does mean that the people out there feel that they're part of a community, that they are worth your time to understand. Of course, to actually drive change, we need to combine the emotional and the technical. We need to be able to approach a discussion and know where we're making progress. And if we're not going to make progress, basically if there isn't enough agreement in the community, stop wasting time on it. Because discussions that drag on forever drive away people, and you aren't going to get an informed consensus if you basically, discuss and discuss and discuss until only one person is left. Yeah, maybe you will be done and maybe no one will disagree. That doesn't mean you actually got an informed consensus of the people who were in at the beginning. And then, but people who do disagree need to feel that the process is fair. And part of fairness is believing that the bodies are respected, that the bodies thinking about these discussions have the respect necessary to do it. So, having bodies like the policy editors, like the project as a whole, looking at these things that the project believes in is an important part of it. And then letting people know what they would need to do if they get to the end and they're like, yeah, I'm sorry, I think you guys still got it wrong. Not being afraid to tell people that, look, if you really still think this is wrong, file a GR. Or bring it to another people. Or, find some additional people who'd be willing to listen. But be honest about how big of a showing that, you need to actually make progress. If one person is unhappy and, most of the other people in the discussion are happy, say, well, yeah, you can file a GR, and if you really feel a need to do so, then absolutely do that. But be aware that currently that doesn't look like you're going to get 50% of the project to support you. Another very important part of learning to grow and to move forward is making mistakes. We don't try and make mistakes, but we all do, and we all will. And I've been practicing that this week, not intentionally, but it happens. For background, for those who aren't developers, I wanted to try and make some changes to better align some stuff with what I thought the project needed. And I was prepared to take a lot of heat on that, but I was actually surprised that in one of the ways that the project disagreed with me. And it became clear that the project actually had some better ideas on how to go forward. So yeah, we're all going to make mistakes, but the thing is that when we do make mistakes, it hurts the people around us and it hurts us. So there's a real need to, try and do your best. But we're all going to have issues where that doesn't come out, where we are surprised, or where even though we try and do our best, that things don't work out that way, and we are going to hurt each other. And what we can do then is work on healing each other and work on honoring that that pain is part of taking the risks necessary to be amazing. But, and I'll tell you, like, coming here was pretty challenging. I was worried about approaching the conference and feeling attacked by everyone, but that's not actually what happened. What did happen is that there were some people who really did disagree with some of what I was doing, but almost all of them were constructive. Almost all of them wanted to try and make Debian better in their own way, and understood I was trying to do that, but disagreed pretty strongly. And what I found is that we have a really, really amazing community where those people were willing to show me better ways of doing things. And by the time I got done, basically I found a way of accomplishing my goals that respected other parts of the project, and that are actually going to be easier to talk about the kind of things I was trying to do, thinking about it the way that other people proposed. And so if you're able to listen to that feedback you get, basically this community is here to help you out. And I'm really touched that I have such a wonderful community to work with. Thank you. So, kind of moving on to a lighter topic, I wanted to talk about, now that we have this, we've agreed we have this awesome community, what do we do with it? So, one of the things I hear sometimes is that, it's us versus the upstreams. That we're getting forced into things by things that the upstreams are doing. I'm kind of always confused by that, because Debian Matters, and basically a lot of people know that outside of this room too. There's a huge chunk of the web that runs on Debian. There are a lot of people who do understand the importance of stable software. And they work on, and they understand when we go to them that the issues of distributions matter. That's not true of everyone. But it is true of a huge, huge portion of our upstreams. And there are many places where if we go approach the upstream respectfully and talk about how Debian has these needs, and we'd like to work with them and meet our needs and understand their needs and meet their needs too, we can change the upstreams. That's especially true if you go look and you find that, like, you look at the list of Debian developers and you look at the upstream contributors like, wait, but the main upstream contributors happen to be Debian developers. Of course we can interact with that community. And we should remember that, and remember that actually we are an important part of the world. And that doesn't mean we should arrogantly demand things, but it does mean that we can come and respectfully interact from a position of strength. So Debian has some really great things going on. We have this amazing collection of software. I mean, who else has 30,000 source packages of vetted software that actually meets the DFSG, that someone has looked at working, making sure they all work together? That's something no one else has. Who else has, we also have a wonderful, sometimes maybe it's hard to use, but we do have a bug process that allows people to interact with us in one way no matter what part of our software they're using. We do have stable releases. If you go look at people who care about running a consistent set of software over a long period of time, one, there are a lot of people who do care about that, and two, Debian is one of the big, big players in that space. But we also have some weaknesses. In order to get something into Debian, you need one of us to look at it. It doesn't have to be a developer. It can be a maintainer. It can even not be a DM if they're willing to get it sponsored. But ultimately, for a new package to enter the system, a Debian developer needs to interact with it. And for packages to continue to be work in the system, a DM needs to work with it. And that means, you know, Debian can only grow so fast. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people writing free software out there, and we can't keep up with all of them. So it's great that we have the DFSG. That's one of the biggest strengths we offer. Unfortunately, that means you have to actually do the license review, and that's time-consuming. And sometimes you run into some problems that are kind of awkward and hard to solve. And that gets in the way of people putting things into Debian. And yes, it's both a strength and a weakness. And unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot of people don't, that, you know, in the web world of constant integration, continuous integration and continuous deployment, people find that stability is not something they want to focus on. And yeah, we have experimental, we have unstable, but our ability to handle things that are in the space is not as good as it is one of our weaknesses. And of course, only one version of a package can be installed, and that's great from a security supportability standpoint. But it's challenging for, as you get more and more packages that depend on that, to get them to all work with a new version. So what I'd like to do is kind of make a call to be awesome. A call to find ways of addressing some of these weaknesses or turning them into strengths. And this isn't something the DPL can do. It's not my job. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to be, you know, doing some of this stuff. But it's something where I hope that some people will take up some of these challenges, and 1 or 2 years from now, DPL will be standing here talking about how they have gotten a project, you know, facilitated the project moving forward and adopting some of these things as our directions. So almost everything does need a stable base of dependencies, whether it's, you know, some container or even some environment that you're going to use to do JavaScript development or something. You've got something outside of your core application that, you know, you want to be running fast, that you'd actually kind of like to be stable. That should be Debian. Fortunately, this is the one where we do the best. In many cases, it is. We're actually doing okay in the Docker space, in the sort of, you know, service container space. But in the Flatpak and Snap world, and in the world of people building app containers, I think a lot of people are migrating away from Debian, and it makes sense for the actual core upstream software. If you're making an app container for some game, of course you're going to build your latest version of your game from source. But what about all your dependencies? It seems like, given how many dependencies we can satisfy, that we ought to make it easier for a lot of those dependencies to be satisfied from Debian. And I feel like we're not achieving that. And some of that's political. But some of that's technical. I'd like us to see us do better on that. And then, what do we do about all these applications that either we're not going to put in Debian, or maybe we are going to put in Debian, but you want a newer version, or the application moves too fast for a stable release? I mean, I guess we can tell our users, just use Flatpak and use their repositories. I, as a Debian user, find that unfulfilling. I mean, maybe it is the right answer, but I, as a Debian user, I'd really kind of like to trust Debian. Pretty much, and only Debian, at least as far as that can go. It probably isn't going to go that far for things that really do have DFSG problems, or especially distributability problems. But for a lot of stuff, maybe we could do a lot better. So I'd really like to encourage people to think about those issues and see if any of them resonate, and kind of, you know, be awesome at it. So that's what I have. I'd love to chat with you all and answer your questions, or you know, dodge your tomatoes or whatever.
Hi, Sam. So I'll ask a traditional question. I'm over the moon at some of the challenges that you're pushing as a DPL. I think you're doing a really good job on those. I hope you think you're doing a good job as well. I know a lot of other people seem to agree with that. Is it too early to ask if you go for a second term?
Yeah, so, okay, there are a couple of things to consider there. I think I'm going to need to make that decision closer in, but honestly, I've been running pretty fast. And I guess I should also let people know that I think I'm probably going to be slowing down a bit over the next couple of months. First of all, I think we've made some great progress, but I also think you don't want to be in sprint mode all the time. But also, I happen to have a lot of time because of some stuff going on at my day job, and my day job is going to be more time-consuming for me over the last couple of months, or over the next couple of months than it has been over the last couple of months. But more generally, when it comes around to next April, I think we should all ask ourselves whether running at this pace 2 years in a row is necessarily what we want to do. And I think that there will be some really interesting conversations to have at the beginning of next spring, both about whether I think that's what I want to do for my life, and whether you guys think that that's what you want to do for the project. I think that if things continue as they go, I would really love to do a second term as DPL. I'm not sure it should be a second consecutive term.
Cool, good answer, thank you. Also, thank you very much for talking about mistakes on stage in front of this audience. That is very strong of you, and it's very appreciated. I'm tempted to come up and give you a hug on stage. I'm not sure how well that would work.
That would be well received. Thanks, Steve.
Hi, Sam. Thanks a lot for your presentation. And I just want to congratulate you and to say that I admire you a lot in the way you are taking the activities as Debian project leader. Really, thanks a lot for contributing to our community and representing us. Thanks.
Thanks for being such a wonderful community. I mean, this is such a wonderful community to be part of.
Hi, Sam. It's Vagrant. I was wondering, you specifically mentioned installing multiple versions of a package, but do you have any ideas how to pull that off? Because fundamentally, I mean, there are a few things like that in Debian, but by and large, that's not the case. And
so, I mean, there's containers. Basically what we've seen, pretty much all the solutions in that space that we've seen in other ecosystems involve some level of creating an isolated environment, whether it's a Python virtualenv, whether it's a Ruby bundle, whether it's a node modules directory, whether it's, I don't quite know what they're doing with ECMAScript ES6 modules. By the way, someone in Debian really needs to be looking at Node and ES6 because, in the ECMAScript modules, the import modules in JavaScript, because it looks like they're trying to get rid of all searching for system modules which might not really meet our needs. Let's be blunt. Actually, that would be really pretty awful. And I really hope, I have not talked to the node maintainers, but I hope we have a strategy there. But so basically all of, and then there's containers. So basically all of the things that I'm aware of for installing multiple versions of the package involve isolating the environments. And I think there are lots of challenges for that in Debian, namely, are you going to provide security support for all those versions? And if not, why is this an okay thing to do? And yet, there are a bunch of people who say that it's working for them for their continuous integration stuff. And there are Debian developers I respect who claim that there are even models under which it's reasonable from a security standpoint. I don't understand how that's true, but someone should figure that out and explain it to us. And then we can talk about, once we understand the models under which this is a sane thing to do, including for security, then we can maybe ask how could we apply that more generally to Debian packages rather than to language-specific packages.
Hello. Thank you. So I'm thank you for the talk. This is my first DebConf, and it's very interesting to see the strong community, and find it very interesting. I'm used to work with a bunch of Fedora and CentOS environments, and so I came to DebConf to learn about the Debian ecosystem. And one thing we do is we use software collections to install a bunch of packages separate from the operating system. And I came to DebConf to ask if this was something that Debian could use and something I could work on for Debian.
So there are a lot of ways in which we do have that today. There are many people who run various collections of software that you can add as an app source. But there's a project called BikeShed that has been that was a proposal a few years ago to make it much easier to do that. Yes, if you're interested in working on BikeShed, I'm sure we can get you information on how to do that. And I think that we would love to see energy put behind that. I'll also note that, kind of the broader Debian community, the Debian ends up being the basis for a lot of work. For example, Ubuntu. And the Ubuntu community has this concept called PPAs that are, very similar to software collections. And so, there are various tools in Debian like ReproPro and Aptly that can allow you to create a software collection on your own. But what we don't really have is a way to do that at a project level. And that's where the BikeShed project comes in.
Thank you very much.
There's a question from IRC. Regarding the level of attention the Moon program gets these days, and the fact that the Debian is a universal operating system, how can we get Debian and free software into space?
Isn't it already? I mean, yeah, I think my understanding is that there are a number of space programs that are already using Debian. So, I mean, more generally, though, I think we can, that's something where we do have an active, for example, AeroAstroBlends community. I don't know if they're necessarily in the right place to talk to people. But I think the answer is with everything. If you're interested in working on it, go do it. Let the project know what you're doing. Ask for help. Ask for a review where it makes sense to you. But that whole strong maintainer model I was talking about, I mean, that's more generally in the Debian community. If you're willing to go do the work within a large latitude, go do it and empower yourself.